to another edition of the Paranormal Concept Show. I'm your host, Paul Rook, and on tonight we are joined, as always, by my two amazing co-hosts. They're going to be amazing this week. Is Kerry Greenaway and Richard Clements. Hello, guys.
Hello.
I am amazing, I know.
Yeah, I know. You was lovely last week.
Well, yes, I wasn't too comfortable with the lovely bit. I mean, Kerry plays up more to that, but as for me, no. Amazing, I'll have that.
I like lovely and amazing.
That bright red lipstick that you put on this night, not befitting, I think.
I will take it off a bit later, but you know, hey,
yeah,
this is radio. I can get away with it occasionally.
Calm down, boys. Calm down. The red lipstick's mine. All mine.
So how have you been this week?
Yeah, not too bad. It's getting a bit tougher, this lockdown scenario. I'm not going to lie. I'm starting to get itchy and need to get out and about a bit more now.
Yeah.
So, you know, you've just got to grin and bear it, haven't you? You just got to, you know,
well, that's it.
I mean,
this week I managed to poke my head out of this week I managed to poke my head out of the window. So
a step forward for you.
It is, absolutely.
Yes, poke your head out with me, and I'm like Kerry. It's a bit itchy here as well, but that's more me hair. It's growing. Yeah, so I was out the other day, and it was just a little bit sort of breezy because I have a crop, for those that don't know, and I could actually feel stuff. I thought, oh, what's all this stuff moving around on top of my head? And it was actually my hair in the breeze. And that's been a few years since I felt that.
While you were out and about, and Kerry, while you were stressing and stuff indoors, I was actually on Twitter. On social media, and I was scrolling through all the feeds and stuff, and I found someone really interesting. She's got a website called spook-eats, and spook-eats. Sorry, slap my wrists. Spook-eats, and her name's Amanda Woomer, and she's joined us tonight all the way from New York. So I want you to welcome Amanda to the show.
Hello, Amanda.
Hello.
Hello.
Cheers and raptures. Hello, Amanda. How are you?
Good. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. I must admit, yeah, the travelling all the way from New York to London's amazing.
Particularly under the circumstances.
Yeah, right?
Magic of radio. Okay, so yeah, Spook-eats, sorry. I keep getting the spooky.
I will slap him for you. Don't worry, Amanda. I'll slap him for you soon.
Everyone says it, so it's okay. Don't feel bad. It's trying to be a pun, but just not doing a very good job at being punny. So
it wouldn't be so bad, but I have actually got it written right in front of me.
Well, that's just unacceptable then.
Yeah, I know, right?
I know, absolutely. It's terrible, isn't it? So on your website, you've got Spook Eats, Food, Travel, and Supernatural. Where did the concept of that come from?
Well, it kind of spurred from three of my favorite things, not to sound silly. I love traveling. I've been traveling internationally since I was 12 years old. I've lived overseas for several years, so travel is a huge part of who I am. I've been interested in the paranormal since I was a little girl. I had a strange experience when I was about 7 years old, and since then I was really interested. When I was a teenager, I started doing the typical shenanigans that teenage ghost hunter wannabes would get into. So I would do stuff like that. And in 2015, my younger brother did pass away. And that was what really kind of kicked it into high gear and really made me want to focus on the paranormal and really start researching it. And then I always joke saying, wherever you are, you have to eat somewhere. So why not eat someplace historic and haunted? So food, travel, and the supernatural just all seem to go hand in hand, at least in my opinion.
Well, same
okay,
here,
yeah, because I was going to ask how the food come into it.
Well, it is, isn't it? Because you go out on an investigation and you always go, meet up for a meal beforehand, or, you know, or late night eats is usually the one, isn't it, after the investigation or whatever. So, it does go hand in hand, particularly in the UK. It's like nearly on every tourist trap, it's like the most haunted inn in the world.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Do you have the same sort of phenomena, that kind of phenomena in America, where it's like they sort of like capitalise on the haunted history?
Not so much. I was actually in the UK over the summer last year, and I was obsessed with all of the pubs and the inns that were like, we're the most haunted. And then right next door, there was another one that said, no, we're the most haunted.
Yeah.
So I took advantage of that. I was like, well, we got to eat at all the most haunted pubs in York. Let's do it, guys.
Oh, York's an amazing city. It's
absolutely gorgeous.
one of my favourites, I have to say.
Yeah, I think that's always.
I must admit, my favourite place to eat in York is the Golden Fleece.
Me too. That's what I always tell people.
There we go. Yes, and me and Paul have dined there on one occasion, haven't we? And
yeah, that's it.
And we can recommend the mixed grill.
Yeah, because that comes out on a plate roughly the same size as a drain cover.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Can't go wrong with that.
So when you go
Absolutely.
to the inns or the places, wherever you go, whether it's the UK or America, do you go with a mind to investigate it, or are you just going to soak up the atmosphere?
I do a little mixture of the two. I do investigations on the side, not necessarily like spook-eats oriented. But when I go to the restaurants and the bars and the hotels, I work with the staff a lot of times to kind of do a hybrid of both just kind of enjoying the experience of the restaurant and their hospitality, as well as kind of investigate a bit of the ghost stories and the claims. So when I do go visit, I am there during regular business hours, which is helpful for the aspect of the website where I'm reviewing the food. I get to try all different kinds of their foods, as well as their cocktails or different drinks. But on the flip side, unfortunately, during regular business hours, it's crowded, it's loud. So it is kind of difficult to conduct really any decent sort of investigation. I'm hoping down the road to be able to become a bit more established, where I can go to these places after hours and actually have full-on investigations. I've done a few with owners or general managers where they've taken me up into the attic or down into the basement, and those have been great experiences where we would conduct EVP sessions or different things like that. But again, you would hear things and you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm hearing walking around over my head. I'm down in the basement, but there's a dining room full of people. So things do get contaminated really easily. So I kind of take this more as it's a very relaxed and laid back approach to investigations. And my biggest hope with spook-eats, and the whole point of really starting it after my brother passed away, was that I wanted to find places in the paranormal that were open to everyone. So many times at least in the States, there are the infamous haunted locations where it's on everyone's bucket list to get there. But a lot of times they're hospitals, they're jails, they're orphanages, they're these completely unattainable locations for your average everyday person, whether you're on an investigation team or not. So my thought was, after losing someone that I love, and I have questions about the afterlife, and I'm searching for answers in the paranormal, other people must also be experiencing that. So let's highlight these locations that are already open to the general public, and they want you to come in to experience what they have to offer. And at the same time, a lot of these places have the same amount of history and the same amount of hauntings, but at the same time, they have heat and electricity and plumbing. So it's much more enjoyable to experience these locations.
That actually sounds right.
Yeah, it does, and I know that's one of Kerry's bugbears. You go to a location in the UK, and you would end up like freezing. It gets so cold.
I hate that.
So what you're actually presenting, Amanda, is not so much like the investigation, as you say, but sort of just get a group of like-minded people together in a sort of like social situation, and in this case, like a restaurant, and talk and discuss your experiences and your sort of thoughts on the paranormal, would you say?
Yeah, it's more so how I describe it is like a travel guide. a spooky travel guide, where if you're traveling to a certain location and you're looking for haunted hotels to stay in or haunted restaurants to dine in, the website acts as a list of places that you can go, and you can look at the food recommendations as well as kind of the creep factor. How spooky is it? How scary is it? And base your travel decisions based off of what I experienced at these locations. I love investigating and I love getting my hands dirty and going to haunted locations, but spook-eats at its very core is really more of a travel guide roadmap for people to be able to find these locations that are readily available and kind of go there on their own to come to their own conclusions about whether or not they think that these locations are in fact haunted.
Yes, because the actual thing I found, like looking at your website, you don't actually sort of have to go in a large group. You can just sort of go to it, use it as a point of reference and say, oh, I'm in that neck of the woods, or, oh, I will travel out to this sort of location for the day, actually visit this tavern or inn or whatever, restaurant, and sort of go and just generally sort of soak up the atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. And my whole point with spook-eats is I call it like paranormal for all, where, I want everyone who is interested to be able to experience the paranormal. So many times you watch TV shows and you think that it's completely unattainable and it's only for, these famous people that you see on TV, when in fact there are so many haunted places and so many paranormal locations in almost every town has at least, a few good ghost stories. So, I host kind of amateur ghost hunts at various haunted locations in my hometown. Not necessarily restaurants and bars, just, the famous haunted locations. And then I also try to bring the masses to these restaurants to kind of help boost the restaurant's business while also kind of giving people the tools to experience the paranormal for themselves. Because if people are interested in it and they have questions that they need answered about the paranormal, they should have every right to be able to go and try to find the answers for themselves instead of someone on TV telling them what to think.
You do like to very much, when you go to the places, you give a brief history, and then you like the ghost story, don't you? In your blogs that you write, I've noticed that you'll go, this is famous for this, and this, and this is supposed to have happened there, and the ghost of so-and-so is supposed to have been seen there. And then you sort of go into what you sort of like, you went and had a look in the attic, like you say. And it's very nice to have that perspective rather than the full-blown paranormal experience, you know what I mean? The full-blown paranormal investigation experience in the dark, with your tech and all that sort of thing. What's your favourite way of doing that? Is it that side of things, or is it the proper paranormal investigation ghost hunt?
Oh gosh, that's a hard question. I've never been asked that before.
We like to do on this show. Nobody's asked before.
Hey, stumped me. I would think, I love investigations with all the fancy tech and stuff, but for me, like, my favorite thing to do, even on like a super fancy paranormal investigation with all of the technology at my fingertips, I love just going into a room by myself with a little recorder and just asking questions. I love having EVP sessions. I love the feeling of just kind of becoming part of the atmosphere and part of the space surrounding me and really just drinking it all in and then seeing if I get anything in response. So even these fancy investigations that I host and take part in, I'm still doing kind of the bare minimum when it comes to investigations. And I love going to these haunted restaurants and learning about the history and learning about these ghost stories. I am forever an academic. I love learning about things. I love researching things. I'm a history nerd through and through. So for me to be able to really research brings me so much pleasure. I always joke saying I don't necessarily see myself as a paranormal investigator, although I do that and I do enjoy it. I really feel I'm more of a paranormal researcher, where I like to research the folklore and the legends and the ghost stories surrounding these locations and kind of try to connect them with the history, to kind of almost paint the backdrop or paint a picture for when other people go to experience it, to see if they experience either the history or the haunting for themselves.
Going off the back of that then, how often is it that you then get verification for some of the history that you know or researched beforehand?
It does happen every so often where kind of the stars align perfectly and kind of everything just falls into place perfectly. I particularly love it when, people are telling me these stories and I'm like, this is absolutely ridiculous. Like, that can't possibly happen. And then I'll go back and research the location and I'll find newspapers confirming it. Or, the Historical Society will, confirm saying, oh no, like this actually happened. These are the names of the people, different things like that. We've gotten names on EVPs that don't mean anything to us at the time, but after we've researched, suddenly the light bulb goes off and it all makes sense. We've had legends and what we think are urban legends and total, baloney and kind of fake have kind of aligned and lined up with newspaper clippings and history and actual events that have occurred. So when the history of a location can back up the paranormal claims and the ghost stories, that to me is absolute perfection. A lot of times when I'm rating the spooky factor of a location, I do take into account, is there any physical evidence of these events happening, whether it's people's own personal experiences, they captured something on camera, or they got an EVP of it, or even better, if there's actual historic evidence of it happening. And there are times where there's a great ghost story in a location, but there's absolutely no evidence that supports it, or the evidence kind of goes against it. I kind of knock points off of my spooky rating because I feel like history and hauntings do have to go hand in hand in order for a place to really, really be haunted.
Boys?
Yeah, I think that's sort of like a great sort of way to actually approach it, because I do like my history, and there's always a bit of a sort of, you mustn't find out the history before you go to a location. I don't actually do it like that. I do it the other way around because I like sort of like the history. But I was wondering, how do you actually acquire these places to actually visit, and is it all sort of like from your own back? Are you sort of constantly looking for locations, or are people actually coming to you now and saying, oh, have you tried our place, or do you want to sort of come to visit us?
When I first started out, it was definitely just good old-fashioned searches on the internet. I would be traveling someplace and I would just type in the city name and type in haunted restaurant, haunted bar, and see what came up. Luckily now, I'm coming up on my 2-year anniversary or birthday or whatever it is for spook-eats. So since then, I've gotten a pretty decent following, and people now write to me and they say, have you heard of this place? Have you gone to this place? Sometimes it's a place that they themselves own or a family member owns, or it's just a place that they've gone to over the years that they've personally had experiences. So I always joke saying, like, I have my spooky bucket list and I'm always looking to add to it. So, like, whenever people give me recommendations, I put it on this list because I would much rather go to a place that someone passionately recommended to me as opposed to a random internet search that could be a hit or miss. And sometimes they have been misses and it's been not fun situations. So I always look more for what people recommend to me in person as opposed to my own searches. But sometimes I have to do a little bit of both depending on where I'm going. And usually the results are pretty good. Every so often you get to places and you're like, this is a terrible idea. But it's been okay.
Yeah, because what sort of gets me, I mean, we travel here around the UK, which is relatively sort of small, and we're quite fortunate that everywhere's relatively accessible, sort of within a day's sort of trip, and you can cover a lot of ground. Well, and UK speaking, that is. But in the US, I mean, you've got a whole sort of continent now. I mean, how much travelling do you actually do involved in spook-eats?
So there's a lot of traveling, and it's never enough for me. Like, I always wish I could do more. I mean, especially right now with quarantine and lockdown, I have not been out of my house for almost 2 months now, except to go to, like, the doctors. So I'm itching to get back out there because I had all these trips planned, and of course they all had to get canceled. So, and unfortunately, you hit the nail on the head. With the UK, everything is fairly close by. My family and I, we rented a car and drove around for 3 weeks, and I feel like we covered a lot of ground. Whereas if you drove around the US for 3 weeks, I don't think you could get everywhere or really anywhere. It's so big. It kills me. It's one of those things where I wish that the United States was so much smaller, because I'll research a place and be like, oh my gosh, this sounds amazing, I have to get there. And then I'll look at how far it is to drive, and it's like 30 hours away. And I'm like, oh man, that's not going to happen. So luckily, my husband, his family lives out in like the western part of the U.S., so we do travel a lot between New York and out to see them. So like that section of the country has been like we've done a really good job at like going back and forth and like finding all the haunted places. Outside of that, not so much. But I'm hoping that once, you know, all of this settles down and we're all able to kind of go back out safely, that I can kind of hit the ground running and really start going again, because I feel like I've lost so much time. Even though it's only been 2 months, and I would probably only go on maybe two. I had 2 trips planned that I had to cancel. So, but lots and lots of travel, which I absolutely love. But it's never enough for me. I'm a very greedy traveler.
I can certainly identify with that, because I enjoy going out travelling, and since this situation has sort of come up, and even though it's only been a couple of months, and I'm sort of thinking, oh, it's all over now. You know, it was good whilst it lasted.
Yeah, it was fun while I could.
But I'm sure it will all get back to sort of some sort of normal of in the future.
Possibly. What's the most wackiest story you've heard that you've actually been able to confirm?
So, I don't know if I was able to confirm it, but the wackiest story that is my favorite location that I've ever been to, it's located in New Jersey, just about 40 minutes south of New York City. And it's a home of a cursed bar stool called the Death Seat. And their legend says that 4 people who have sat in this seat have died of a heart attack while sitting in the chair. They still have this bar stool in the bar, but it's now, you know, chained off so no one sits in it, luckily. But while I was researching it, I actually did come across newspaper articles that the first 2 gentlemen, basically, that were fighting over this bar stool, they died within less than a month. I think it was like 10 days of each other. And they both died in this bar. It was like all written out in the newspapers and stuff. They, you know, died of a heart attack while at the Old Canal Inn. And according to the legend, they both sat in the seat. So I can't confirm if they sat in that seat for sure, but both of them did die of a heart attack while sitting in the bar, at least, within 10 days of each other. Now this bar has like totally franchised off of this Death Seat. They have the Death Seat burger that is a heart attack on a plate, which I just think is ironic and hilarious. It's like this burger that has mashed potatoes, jalapeno peppers, and cheddar cheese on top, and then they beer batter it and deep fry it. Which is just so American, like, oh, let's deep fry that. And I always joked saying like, oh, if you don't die of a heart attack by sitting in the seat, you're definitely going to die of a heart attack after eating this burger.
Did you try it? Did you try it?
I did. I had to try it. I split it with my mom because I was like, it came out and it was enormous. And I said, like, there's no way I can finish this. This is a monstrosity. So we split it. So I think because we split it, we didn't have our heart attack. Like, we made it, luckily. But it was just interesting to see, like, this urban legend that this chair kills people was somewhat confirmed, at least with the newspaper articles of these 2 gentlemen that did die in the location 10 days apart from each other. And the fact that this bar really doesn't even try to hide the fact that these things happened, that they're trying to market it. and made it an entree off of it. I just think it's kind of sick, but I love it.
I can imagine there's a whole franchise of places out there that have done the same sort of thing, though.
Oh, yeah. It's shameless, and I love it.
Yeah.
Kind of no different from a Jack the Ripper tour, is it? It's capitalising off of people that have died by a horrific serial killer, you know.
It's like, but it was in the 1800s. It's fine. It's not too soon.
So when do you think is too soon to investigate a situation? Do you think that there should be a time limit on that?
I don't know. I mean, luckily, at least for me, most of the places that I've investigated are like those typical, haunted places that were, at least by American standards, they're old, built in the 1800s. When I was over in the UK, they'd be like, oh, this pub is from the 1300s, but it's not the oldest. And I'm like, oh, of course it's not. Why would it be?
We're rather smug about that, I have to say.
I thought it was the coolest thing. I'd be like, oh, this pub's from like 1295. I love it. Let's get a beer. But like for me, I don't know, because there are some locations that I've gone to that were, mental hospitals that were still running in the 1970s and the 1980s, and they now allow groups to come in and investigate. And I did have a conversation with someone that it's a former asylum in my hometown that's transformed into a kind of an upscale restaurant and a boutique hotel. And they're trying very hard to not talk about the fact that they're a former insane asylum and that they're haunted. And I talked with them, and they said that they really feel that paranormal investigations, at least in their location, kind of adds to the stigma of mental health. And I thought about it, and at first I was kind of surprised, because I thought, so many paranormal investigators that I know are so empathetic and are in tune with their thoughts and their emotions and really connect with other people, be them living or dead. And so at first I kind of disagreed with them, but then the more I thought about it, I thought that at least here in America, a lot of the asylums that are still standing, obviously not up and running anymore, but that are still standing, a lot of times they host things like paracons or haunted houses, different things like that, where, if you're in a haunted house and it's an asylum theme, you have people in straitjackets, sitting in the corners, rocking back and forth, muttering to themselves. And that is 100% like the stereotypical, asylum inmate sort of thing. Whereas at the time, people who were in asylums, a lot of times, they had schizophrenia or epilepsy, things that today are not that big of a deal and are totally livable with. At the time, you would just lock them away in the asylum. So I do think that there are certain things that it might be too soon, or even in poor taste, what we investigate, or at least how we choose to approach it when we investigate it.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good way of looking at it. I think, especially with these sort of like asylums and stuff. I mean, people I think tend to sort of like concentrate on a sort of time period, and whenever you go into one, you sort of like try and sort of think up with the early 20th century, late 19th century sort of atmosphere to actually approach to investigate it, and sort of tend to ignore if it has been functional up until relatively recently. I think people will tend to ignore that and be sort of quite selective of what they will actually want to try and experience.
No, absolutely. I completely agree. Just over the years of researching, because again, like when I think of, insane asylums, I 100% think of the 19th century, the early 20th century. But like you never think of like 1960s, 1970s. Oh, asylums weren't around then, but they were. So it's definitely, I don't know what that fine line is between what is too soon and what's acceptable. It could be some places are fine with you coming in and kind of stirring up energy, even if it's, only, 30 or 40 years old, whereas other places might just be more protective of it. And I think you might have to take it as a case-by-case situation. I don't know. But definitely the conversation I had with the gentleman in my town about the local former asylum definitely at least put it on my radar that it was something that I need to think about when I choose a location, and especially once I'm at a location, because history is forever happening. You know, you can't just say like, oh, this happened in the 19th century. You know, things are constantly happening, and, you know, buildings and structures are standing through decades, and people come and go and leave traces, and, you know, who's to say what you're interacting with isn't more recent, and it could be too soon.
Paul?
When you come over to the UK, did you actually investigate any of the locations you visited?
I did not. I have. I'm friends with the guys who run Haunted Magazine, and when I was here with them, or over there with them, I should say, I missed one of their investigations by 2 days. I was so upset. They like announced it 2 or 3 days after I had booked my flight, and I was like, guys, like this is the worst timing ever. So I would have loved to have been able to. But
do you remember what location they were?
Oh gosh, I think it was Bosworth Hall.
Yeah, I did that one quite a lot. Yeah,
I was gonna say statistically speaking, it was probably Bosworth Hall because that's what I always see them hosting. But I was also there with my parents and my husband, who they support spook-eats and they think it's cool, but I don't know. My parents have been on an investigation with me. I don't know if they would particularly enjoy it. And it was my dad's 60th birthday trip. So I didn't want to like be that person to be like, guys, we're going on a ghost hunt tonight. Happy birthday, Dad. So I got to get back there so I can actually investigate. Because so many locations, I was like, again, I'm a history nerd. And like the history there is just mind-boggling to me because, you know, here in the U.S. we have, you know, the European history only goes back to, you know, technically the 1400s if you go down south, but really only like the 1600s up where I'm at. Then you have, you know, the native indigenous history that unfortunately we've really built all over. Like we've built on top of it, so it's hardly anything is here anymore. So like when you can go to the UK and see a building from the 1100s, it's pretty cool. Like to sound like the wide-eyed innocent American girl.
But there are places, aren't there? I think both sides of the pond. You come over to here, you've got the, you know, there are some iconic places in America that us Brits would love to come and investigate, which we may never get the chance to do through many reasons, nothing to do with now, the circumstance now, but in general, you know, because it is so huge. I mean, you know, we talked about that a little bit earlier. It is such a huge thing. We've always joked about a Winnebago trip, but I think we'd have to do that for about a year to cover everything that we'd want to do. In America, and it is one of those, isn't it? It's like wherever you are, you always want to do something in somewhere else that's maybe more out of reach, possibly. You know, you like to come to the UK, and as I say, there's plenty of people. And one of the places that always comes up when the famous question of if there's anywhere in the world you could, you know, would like to investigate. A lot of people say Alcatraz from the UK, don't they?
They do. I've actually heard that. Yeah, I've heard Alcatraz a lot the last few days even. So that's very interesting. Just from like my friends over in the UK, they're like, "Oh, Alcatraz." I was like, "What is with Alcatraz right now?"
I don't get that. I don't understand it. There's some more iconic places that I would like to visit in America rather than Alcatraz, quite frankly.
I think with the UK, they've got a thing about prisons anyway, because we've got like Shepton Mallet and Shrewsbury and Lancaster and all those sort of big prisons that we can go and investigate. But when it comes to some of the US prisons, they're so much bigger. And the most iconic one is Alcatraz. I would love to go and visit Alcatraz. I've even contemplated doing a paranormal event there, but I've contacted them and they won't allow us because it's a bird sanctuary place, and they won't let you stay overnight.
I had no idea about that. That's very random. It's a bird sanctuary.
I know, yeah, absolutely. But Yeah, it's like a protected island because of the birds or something that are on there.
There is one place you've done, though, that comes up very much in the UK spectrum, as it were, which is Gettysburg.
Yes. I love Gettysburg.
It's a very strange place, though, isn't it? Because, again, it's a vast area, I understand.
Yeah, the first time I went there, I was 14 years old, and I went there just for the history aspect, and it was there that I got really bitten by the paranormal bug, so to speak. I describe it to people who have never been that as soon as you get near it, because a lot of the fields surrounding the town, that's the battlefield. That's where people, fought and they died and they were buried right there. And I describe it as very heavy, that the whole atmosphere of the town is just very heavy. It's very somber. And I think, where some cities in America that have had kind of like that darker history or, tragic events occurred, a lot of times they really try to market it and really build off of it commercially. And while Gettysburg has done that with different tours and, stores and shops and things like that, at the very heart of it, I think people take it very seriously. Again, it's one of those things where it only happened 150 years ago. So, it's not so much that it happened too soon sort of thing, but it's still very recent. And with Gettysburg, I've been there probably 5 or 6 times now, and there are still things that I have not gotten to do or see while I've been there. There are some places that I go that, every time I have to go. I have to go to the Farnsworth House. I have to go to the Dobbin House. I have to go to the battlefield. But there are some places that I still haven't gone to. There's some museums that I've missed out on. And it's so expansive. And again, everywhere you stand is sort of hallowed ground. So it's a very powerful place to go. And if you're a history buff, obviously it's absolutely amazing. And if you're into the paranormal and really looking at haunted locations, it is just, I feel like everywhere you go has a ghost story that is both tragic and frightening at the same time. So Gettysburg is one of those bizarre little towns. It's a tiny, tiny town that's just kind of it's just surrounded and enveloped by these battlefields and these fields and these pastures that you can't even fathom what it was like 150 years ago, because now it's just a field. And that it's dotted with like monuments and statues and stuff, but it's just a field. It's been cleared away of all of the the destruction and the trauma. But again, even though like physically it's all cleared away, spiritually you can just feel that something is lingering there, and it's a whole lot of trauma and a whole lot of sadness and hurt.
Yeah, I've heard this sort of said about Gettysburg a few times, and I think with Gettysburg and the feeling I get from it, you've got to remember, and it was a battle that was fought over 3 days, and there's a lot of sort of information written about the battle, and there's lots of famous incidences within the battle that actually occurred itself. So I think for an actual scope to actually go and visit, I can actually see why it is a big attraction. You've got things like Devil's Den. You've got like the famous Pickett's Charge, which was on the third day. Cemetery Ridge, a Big and Little Round Top. These are all very well known sort of like events, but they all were condensed within a 3-day time period on quite not being disrespectful, was quite an insignificant little town.
Oh, it is, yeah. Absolutely.
And considering there wasn't even technically supposed to be a battle there, I believe the Confederates actually turned up looking for shoes or something. I think that's the story. And they just happened to run into the Union Army. And then the battle ensued from there on.
Yeah, and it's also one of the first battles that was photographed. Yes. The aftermath, you just see the complete carnage. So, when I was 14, I bought a book that was like a then and now book, and you would go to places like Devil's Den, and you would stand at a certain location, like they would give you coordinates. This is where you stand. Now hold the book up, and here's a photograph from the day after the battle. and you would just see, horses and bodies and just everything as far as the eye could see. So I think the fact that it was one of the first battles that was also photographed and sort of immortalized in history.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It really, I think, just adds to the heaviness that you experience when you're standing there.
Because I know a lot of your battlefields over there are sort of designated national parks now, and they're all sort of on farmland now. I mean, how much preservation is actually done on these battlefields to keep them as they were, or is the land still worked? I mean, are the fields still being ploughed? Do farmers still sort of own sort of sections of these sort of battlefields now?
From what I've experienced, at least the greater battles and the very well-known ones are kind of, they're registered historic landmarks. They're national parks of sorts, or at least state parks. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times they are really transformed into almost, I don't want to use the word like a hiking trail, but that's kind of what it is, where people can go. Sometimes cars are allowed to go through, like Gettysburg. It's so massive that you have to drive, where you can walk or drive through these places and really kind of experience the statues and the memorials and things like that. There was actually out on the battlefield years ago in Gettysburg, there was a hotel that was connected to the house that was Robert E. Lee's headquarters. The first time that my family and I went down there, we stayed at this hotel, and it was like some nasty motel chain or something. Like, it wasn't anything nice, but it was attached to General Lee's headquarters, so we wanted to stay. And since then, they've actually closed the motel down and destroyed, like, it's demolished. The hotel is gone, and the house is all that's left, because they said, this is a national park now. We can't have this hotel kind of leeching off of this historic landmark. So they did, actually. They shut it down. They got rid of it and kind of returned the land to how it would have looked at the time. Which, again, the history nerd in me is like, yes, way to go.
Yeah, same here.
Get rid of that stuff.
I'm so jealous. Yeah. Right, guys, take over whilst I can and sort of just soak in what Amanda's just told me there.
Now, talking about hiking trails, I'm going to bring Paul in on this one because he's a bit more knowledgeable about this one than I am. Paul.
Yes.
Amanda's done quite a lot of the hiking trails, and she also talks about missing the hikers, missing people
missing
like that.
One.
Yeah, so I'll leave you two to go through that one.
I sort of, that was another topic that I stumbled upon last year by Paul Pilades, I think his name is. Mm-hmm. And I sort of got into watching these documentaries and stuff, and it was just that so many people go missing in national parks, and some of them in such strange circumstances. And I wondered if you'd come across any of these stories yourself.
So I have a little bit here and there. Since we've started quarantine, I started highlighting different hiking trails around the United States, just because a lot of restaurants are closed down and there are like no bars right now. So I tried to highlight places that were still open to the public, where you could go and still be safe. You could go outside, get some fresh air. But these places were also purportedly haunted. And unfortunately, a lot of these places are haunted because of hikers, whether these were hikers, at the turn of the 20th century or in more recent years, sometimes wandering off the trails or getting too close to a precipice or any other sort of tragedy where they're kind of still haunting the area. There's one park that is in around my hometown that it's not a national park and it's not a state park, but it's one of the most haunted wildlife reserves or parks in the U.S., where it has roots in like Native American folklore with witches and curses, and the death rate there is astronomical. Just within the last 5 years, I think that there's been like 7 or 8 deaths of like from people just falling, slipping, going off the trail, getting lost at night. But luckily, even more people have gotten lost in the woods and then they've made it out safely. And a lot of times they report following a group of hikers, that they're calling out to them, hey, do you know the way out? Do you know where you're going? We don't know where we are. And they keep following them, and they can never quite catch up with them. And these hikers eventually just vanish, but right before they kind of lead people to safety. So it's this story that I've heard for years and years, and it's still happening even in 2020. Which is so weird to me, because so many times you hear stories like this and you're like, oh my gosh, like that can't happen in today's day and age. We have smartphones and GPS and cell phones, and you can't, how can that possibly happen? But it does, and it is, and every year people report seeing either these phantom lights that lead them out, or these phantom hikers that kind of lead them to safety. So I would love to learn more about other national parks around the country, more in depth, to see if, this phenomenon of phantom hikers is more widespread. Because I feel like it's kind of like this urban legend that you hear stories from all over that, someone led me to safety. Oh, well, who was it? Where are they? Oh, I don't know. So
some of the stories that I was looking into, you had a story of a group of hunters went out on the hunt one day, and one of them went missing, and they've never found anybody, so they can't say that he died. There's no signs of struggle or anything. It was just like he just plucked out of existence.
Yeah.
And there's a few stories like that Paul Pilatus is looking into. I do believe he's written a few books about it. It's called Missing 411. And we spoke to a hunter friend of ours in Ohio, I think he is, and he said that if a hunter wanted to go missing and didn't want to be found, then he could quite easily do that, because some of the parks are so massive that you could just quite easily disappear into. But some of these other stories were involving children. And it was, they would disappear within a matter of like 200-300 foot of their parents, and never been seen again, or they found some remains either where the searchers looked previously and didn't find anything, or they'd find it like 200 miles away.
Oh my gosh!
And this is like, I think it was a 7-year-old. I think that one was.
I think the interesting thing as well is something Amanda referenced, actually. It seems to happen in clusters as well. So when you look at the size of the national park where these incidences were happening, it seems to happen in clusters as well, which is absolutely fascinating when you start breaking it down into data, of being able to go, right, okay, so this cluster happened here, and this, it happened over here, and stuff like that. So that leads us into cryptids, really, because there's that whole theory of the cryptid Bigfoot and, things like that. What's your take on that side of things, Amanda?
Oh, gosh. I feel like the little girl in me wants so badly to believe in things like, Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and things like that. I just recently finished working on a children's book, actually, that's coming out later this year, called the Cryptid ABC book. So it's like all in rhyme and stuff, and talks about the different cryptids, through the alphabet from around the world. So I'm fascinated by the world of cryptids. And I feel like I'm the sort of person where I feel like anything is possible until it's disproven. And you really can't disprove, the existence of these creatures, because not every single inch or centimeter of the planet has been, explored and really, researched yet. So, who is to say that there aren't things lurking at the bottom of the ocean, or deep in the forest, or high up in the mountains? And I really do kind of include cryptids under the umbrella of the paranormal. So many times people, they see like, oh, Amanda, she runs spook-eats. She's all about the paranormal. Oh, she's the ghost girl. And I say like, oh yeah, absolutely. Like I'm 100% like haunted houses, ghosts, all of that. But I'm also just as equally interested in cryptids because they are outside of the realm of what is normal. We can't explain it, therefore it's paranormal. So I do always try to like encourage people to think of cryptids and ghosts kind of the same family, just kind of like distant cousins of sorts.
So I think this is where, like with people in the US, they're a bit jealous of our history. It's the other way around when it comes to cryptids because in the UK, you know, when we talk about cryptozoology, mainly it's big cats, and I think apparently there's like a Bigfoot or something in Scotland somewhere. But that's about as weird and wacky as we get. But you go to America and they've got like swamp monsters and lizard people. And,
it's a bit ridiculous sometimes where you'll read it and be like, this is terrible.
Oh dear. I just imagine a little man in a suit running around. And...
Well, I think, as you say, Amanda, I mean, with myself as well, the cryptozoology side of things, it seems to have that hold. It sort of fires that imagination in you, doesn't it? It does bring out sort of like the child in you, doesn't it? And I can see why you've probably aimed your sort of book, I believe, what you're writing, or you've written it sort of for a children's audience, because that is something I definitely would have gravitated towards than if I was a lot younger than what I am now, unfortunately. But there you go.
Well, that's it. I mean, like you've got Scooby-Doo, the cartoon character Scooby, and he's almost like the first paranormal team you ever get to meet.
Yeah.
Just watching on TV as a kid. So I can imagine that's going to be quite a popular book.
I hope so. I enjoyed working on it, so hopefully people will enjoy it. It's cute, if nothing else. I tried to make some of these cryptids that are absolutely terrifying a bit more like rated G and friendly looking, which was really hard sometimes. I'm like, this is terrible. Like, I'm trying to go through like A through Z. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like what cryptid starts with X? What cryptid starts with U?
Xylophone, fish.
Yeah. Exactly.
So taking you back, we're talking about childhood. What's the earliest childhood spooky experience or memory you've got?
So for me, I always joke saying that my ghost origin story was I was 7 years old and I was, in my parents' house, and I was in bed one night, kind of really comfortable, not tossing and turning or trying to fall asleep or anything. I was just laying there, and I looked out into the hallway and I saw an old woman in a bathrobe with like kind of like crazy hair, like she had just gotten out of bed. And, she was walking in the hallway and she stopped and turned to stare at me for about maybe 2 seconds before she continued on towards what is my parents' linen closet. And it took about, I don't even know, half a second before I screamed for my mom because there's no old lady in our house. Absolutely petrified. And my mom, she actually ran through the old woman before she vanished, like through the closet. And my mom, obviously, she didn't see her. She came in running to see what was wrong. And that was the only time I ever saw her. I don't feel like I grew up in a haunted house. I never really had any other experiences in the house. I always felt very safe and comfortable, even to be alone. I was never freaked out to be home alone. But years later, my parents told me that the previous owner was an older woman that had died in the house, and her bedroom was my bedroom. So in hindsight, obviously, I put the pieces together and I was like, that had to be who this old woman was. But I'm very glad that my parents waited until I was about 17 or 18 to tell me that instead of 7. And I don't really know what exactly it was. People always ask me, like, do you think it was intelligent or residual? And I feel like it was residual. I just happened to be awake in the right place at the right time. But she did turn to look at me, which makes me feel like she saw me. She just wasn't going through the motions. So I'm not really sure what it was, but it was a one-time thing. I never experienced it again. And even looking back now, I was terrified at the time and I was scared, but like in hindsight, like I didn't feel threatened or, I didn't feel like she was malicious or anything like that. So, I mean, I just probably screamed because I saw a crazy old lady in my parents' house, not realizing what was happening. So I wish I could go back in time and actually like be able to like assess the situation a little bit better. But it was, that I always joke saying that was kind of the start of everything that really made me think there's something else out there. Let's see what it is.
She's probably looking at you going, what the hell's that little girl doing in my bedroom?
Right? And ever since then, I sleep with my door closed.
Wise move.
Don't blame you.
So when you're released from confinement, as we all are, what's the first thing on your list that you're going to do? Is it visit your husband's family and get back out that way again?
It probably it should be. His brother.
I'm hearing about that.
No. The problem is that in about 2 weeks, his brother is supposed to be getting married. And I'm pregnant right now, so my husband is like, "You're not going anywhere. It's not safe." So once everything's settled down, and once baby spook-eats is here, we'll go out that way. It depends on when that is, when things kind of settle down. We always go there in the fall, around Thanksgiving holiday in November. So we'll definitely go out for that. I don't know if we'll go out prior to that. We did have 2 trips planned down to the Florida Keys, particularly Key West, back in April. And then my husband and I had a trip planned to Baltimore. So those are the 2 places where we're itching to get to, because we had places booked and now they're like, "Oh, let us know when you want to reschedule. You've already paid for it." And I'm like, "Yes, I know we already paid for it."
So I think quite a few of us are in that situation at the moment.
Yeah. So it's like, if it's not going to see the in-laws, it's going to kind of make sure that we don't lose our spots in these hotel rooms that we paid good money for. So, but I'll be thrilled just to get out of the house in general, because I'm starting to go a little crazy. I've made 2 children's books while in confinement, and I'm working on a new big kid book now. So eventually I'm going to run out of things to do.
No, it does get like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So Amanda, before we let you go, can you just tell everybody where they can find you? Give all your links, give yourself a shout out.
So my website is called spook-eats.com. It's spelled SPOOKEATS. So Spook Eats, not Spooky Eats.
That brings up a whole new search. I'll just warn you, everybody. Spook Eats.
Okay.
Yeah, so my website is spookeats.com, and then I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And on each of those platforms, it's just @SpookEats. Nice and easy. I tried to keep it easy for everyone. I'm slowly working on a YouTube page, but there's only 2 awkward videos on there right now. So if you want to subscribe to that, that's also Spook Eats. But if not, I don't blame you for holding off until it gets better. And then I always tell people, again, like I mentioned before, that I'm always looking to add to that spooky bucket list. So if anyone has any recommendations, whether they're in the States or over in the UK, because I'm already planning my next trip back there because I didn't get to do everything I wanted to. My email is spookeats@gmail.com, and I'm always looking for haunted restaurants, bars, hotels, pubs, inns, cafes, anything like that. So yeah, I love to hear from people, so don't be a stranger and reach out.
And don't worry, we will share all the links on the Paranormal Concept. Oh my God, I'm going back in time. The Paranormal Concept Facebook page as well when the show goes out. So don't you worry, if you can't find her through those links, you'll be able to find it there as well. I'd like to say thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have to let you go and take a quick break right now. But we'd love to have you back again at some point, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Anytime. You know where to find me.
Brilliant. Well, we're going to take a quick break, so join us right after this.
Hello, Harry Price here. If there's nothing me and my friends enjoy more here on the other side, it is to sit back and relax and listen to the Paranormal Concept Show, right here on the PAUK Radio Network. Broadcasting a plethora of interesting and informative content for all your paranormal needs. Find them across social media to keep up to date with forthcoming shows and all their other adventures. Hello, is there anybody there?
And welcome back to the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Now, before the break, we were talking to the lovely Amanda Woomer from spook-eats, all about food, paranormal investigations, ghost stories, all sorts of things we were talking about. And in the second half, we thought we'd actually have a look at food and the effects it could have on your body whilst you're actually out investigating, right, guys?
Yeah, we did.
Right.
I mean, everyone that I know, in particular, with paranormal teams, all go out and the first thing they do, or the last thing they do, is always go for a cheeky McDonald's.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's got to be done, right?
Well,
Guilty as
I tend to go out for Harvester or something before, because McDonald's is a quick fix, isn't it?
That's like your late night snack, isn't it? Now, pre-investigation, if you've been driving hours, sometimes hours, isn't it, to get to a location, you have a meal before you start investigating. That's kind of like the norm, even if it is a cheeky snack before you begin, because you know you're going to be up late at night, you need the energy. If it's cold, you want the warmth kind of thing that food will give you. You know, it's just the done thing. It's all part of it, right?
Well,
Yeah, I actually know someone that goes to a rather well-known chicken fast food restaurant, and they order so much they actually have some for the way home as well.
Ooh.
This wouldn't be in a bucket by any chance, would it?
I think it could be a bucket, a bucket or two, maybe. I don't know.
That's a bit.
I've not actually
cold
been out.
grease.
Yeah, I've not actually been investigating with this person for a very long time, so. But I've heard habits haven't changed.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Now, before we begin on this, I would like to point out there are many products out there, many fast food outlets out there, but we're going to obviously be talking, and some of the information we're giving out are going to focus on one thing, but this goes across the board, you know, in regards to fast food in general. I would say,
Yeah.
Oh, my dog got excited. I mentioned the fast food word.
Yeah.
He got all excited. Food is going on. He's like, oh, dinner? Not yet, babes. So it's part and parcel of your paranormal investigation, the food. And it's not just about what you eat before and what you eat afterwards. It's actually sometimes like those cheeky snacks you have in the hub room in the break. We all have a lot of tea, coffee, biscuits, energy drinks.
Energy drinks is
Yeah.
the main one, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a big one on the field, isn't it? A lot of snacks, you know, like chocolate and Haribos and those kind of snacks come out, don't they?
Absolutely.
of course, yeah. Like, you've got to love a cheeky Haribo sour. I do like those.
See, again, I normally opt for sandwiches and savoury stuff.
Yeah, see, I'm
But
more
that's-
of a savoury girl.
Yeah.
But I like my chocolate, it has been known. But, you know.
Never. Really?
No.
I know, right?
Is that of you?
I'm a bit of a chocoholic. And, but a lot of these foods are highly processed. They contain a lot of carbohydrates, added sugars, even in things you wouldn't expect sugars to be. They've added the sugar, unhealthy fats and salt, you know, sodiums and stuff like that. And these products can have a physical effect on you. So sometimes what you think might be paranormal activity or paranormal effects on you physically, you know, oh, I feel sick, I've got a headache, I'm feeling very depressed, or I'm having a drop. Some of it might be put down to the food that you're eating before an investigation, during an investigation, or in general lifestyle.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah. I
absolutely.
mean, that certainly makes sense. In a lot of sort of cases, yeah, you sort of hear a lot of sort of people sort of sensing sort of stuff through physical means, like headaches or sort of feeling a bit under the weather. So, yeah, it does make sense.
It's approached from a very almost like spiritual perspective, isn't it? Like you're in an investigation and all of a sudden you're starting to feel really sick, you know, and
Yeah.
you've got,
Yeah,
it's drawing
I think
my energy.
I think the food aspect is something that does get overlooked Because, you know, we're on investigation. We do say to people, you know, have something to eat before you go into the investigation, because otherwise you're going to be sitting there going, is anybody there? And then someone's stomach rumbles.
Yeah.
You know, so it's, you know, it is a bit of a catch-22, and people don't think about the food they eat enough to think, well, okay, I'm experiencing a headache. Is that something that's affecting me environmentally or internally?
I think particularly with sort of like fast food, we all sort of eat it, but usually if we eat it at night, we usually go to bed not long afterwards. So any of these effects will probably sort of pass slowly through us whilst we're actually sleeping.
Yeah,
as opposed to having something to eat late at night and then going on for a further 6 hours and throughout the night.
I do think food is, I mean, this is in general now, you know, when we talk about food and nutrition now, I would just like to state, disclaimer, we are not physiologists, doctors, nutritionists. We're just talking about it from, you know, a basic research perspective. I know my body doesn't take carbs well. Yeah, if I have a huge amount of carbs in a meal, I end up generally feeling very sluggish. I get like a carb coma, I call it, because all I want to do is sleep after I've had a lot of carbs. So I get very tired.
Sugars can have the same sort of effect.
Yeah, I feel very tired. I just want to slob out, I think is the expression. I feel very sluggish in myself. That's the effect that has on me, personally. And everybody will have something that maybe, you know, doesn't suit their body particularly well, but we eat it anyway and think, oh, to hell and to high water, we'll just have it. You know what I mean? So you have to be quite aware of your own body, and in whether you're, regardless of what situation you're in, you listen to your body. We talk about, don't we? Your body is a temple.
Yeah.
Listen to your body. And you do have to be very aware of what you are putting inside your body and the effects it can have, because if you are out on an investigation, for example, if I had had a high carb meal before I went on an investigation, so even if we went to somewhere like a normal restaurant and I'd had a big plate of chips, onion rings, you know, I don't know, even a lot of rice or something like that, the chances are at some point in the night I'm going to have like that carb coma feeling where I just want to sleep. I'm very tired, I'm very sluggish. That's going to hit me at some point in the evening, because I know that that's how my body reacts to carbs, not because I'm being drained spiritually or spirit's taking my energy. Do you know what I mean? It's an actual physical response my body gives.
It's certainly
something. If there is someone else out there that, like you, that has that, and they don't realise that it's, you know, what they're eating, you know, that they will actually put it down to some sort of spiritual activity draining you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly, as you sort of like get more senior in years as well, I sort of like, I have to watch what I eat now, whereas when I was younger, you can pretty much rock and roll with the punches and eat anything. It's only sort of recently I've started to sort of notice what sort of foods sort of give me sort of certain sort of feelings and stuff like that. So I do act accordingly now. But as for like youngsters, I think, you know, they can tend to eat pretty much what they like, but not really notice or understand the effects the food is actually having.
No, that's right. And they don't get taught that at schools either now. Because I know when I was at school, we used to learn about cooking and calories and all that sort of stuff. Not that I paid much attention to it, but, you know, they used to do like home economics at school.
Well, yeah.
And, you know, they don't do that anymore.
Yeah, classic domestic science. I used to cook a wicked pineapple upside down cake.
Okay.
Yeah, just saying.
I mean,
I made cheese on toast. That was mine.
I mean, you talk about sugars. You know, when we talk about sugars, it gives you a quick energy fix, and then you'll have a sugar crash. If you've got an underlying issue, that's the other thing. A lot of people walking around with issues that they don't realise they've got. Yeah. You know, this is something that's actually been highlighted in recent times with the COVID. You know, they didn't have any underlying issues, but actually they did, but didn't realise it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Until something becomes to the point where it affects you physically, that you then go and get checked out and realise that you've got diabetes or you've got, high cholesterol or, you know, those sort of things. you could be eating these foods and these could be contributing to an underlying issue that you may not realise you've had, like blood pressure, things like that. And again, we'll come into this into a little bit more depth, but we're not picking on McDonald's in particular. I would like to put that out. It was just an example that we're using. So I was actually quite shocked at some of these. In a Big Mac meal, which is just a standard Big Mac, this isn't going large or anything, this is just a standard meal. So a Big Mac, medium Coca-Cola, for example, or medium French fries with that. Yeah, so it's a standard Big Mac meal.
Yeah.
That's got 1,080 calories in it.
Right.
Standing alone through that. 43 grams of that are fats.
Right.
Yeah.
80 milligrams of that is cholesterol within the fat content. It's crazy. There's 1,255 milligrams of sodium.
Right.
Now, one thing I would like to say, there's a difference between sodium and salt. Everyone goes, oh, sodium is all salts. It's not. It makes up a whole different ball game, right?
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Isn't sodium part of salt? But
it is part of it. It's part of the same group, but it's not inclusive.
Okay.
So people seem to think sodium and salt is an interchangeable term, and it isn't. It's just a part of the group.
Right.
Yeah, I think salt, isn't it? Sodium mixed with something else.
Mm-hmm.
So the chemical composition's different.
If you think in Chinese, they talk about sodium monoglutamate.
Yes.
Yeah, it's things like that. I'm not an authority on this, you understand. So we're not nutritionists. We just had a quick look at this to talk about it in regards to the paranormal and the effects it could have on your body. There's 148 grams of carbohydrate, 68 grams of salt. There are lots of other things in it as well, but I'm not going to read the whole list. But just those totals, when you look at those totals, that's really high for one meal. When you think about it. And it's not that big a meal, really, a Big Mac meal, is it?
No, for a medium meal, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, you still got to break it down into the chemical compounds and to get the, because it does have an effect on your body.
Well, out of all of these, within 10 minutes, now this came from what should we say? I wouldn't say controversial, but a biased site. I will say that. Where I found this information, and I did find some conflicting information, which we will put out there. But apparently, within 10 minutes of eating just a standard Big Mac meal, the high calorie content increases your blood sugar levels. Now, one site said it was abnormal levels, and another site said that it was unlikely to reach abnormal levels. So I would say on that, it probably depends on how you digest it. So an effect of high blood sugar level in general, forget abnormal, normal, but a high blood sugar level can give you increased thirst, headaches, trouble concentrating, blurred vision, frequent urination, fatigue, weight loss. Right?
Weight loss?
Yeah, this is long term, though, remember.
Oh, okay.
That's more long term. But with the first 10 minutes, if you've got an increased blood sugar level, not realising maybe you're on the verge of type 2 diabetes, which is very common nowadays.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest rising problems I think people have, type 2 diabetes.
It's something that is checked a lot now. Even when I go to the doctor, it's often checked now.
Paul, wouldn't you say that that's one of the highest rising physical problems?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking at the guidelines for blood sugar levels, obviously because I'm in St John Ambulance, their guidelines is when you test the blood, it's got to read between 4 and 8.
Yeah.
I think ambulance crews normally go on the premise of 3.5 to 7.5, so it's not that much difference. But obviously, anything above that is going to be quite high. So, yeah, within 10 minutes, if it goes up above 8, then it's obviously high.
When I was pregnant, I had gestational diabetes, and when I was first tested, I was 12 plus. Which is obviously incredibly high, and it needed to be brought down.
Yeah, when I was having my health issues, I think mine was like 10, between 10 and 12. But I have now managed to bring that right down with medication and stuff like that. So I'm still within, I mean, I'm still high, but I'm on the top of their guidelines. So mine's about 8 now.
Yeah, I mean now normally I'm fine, but at the time when I was pregnant, I really struggled, and they only did it through diet because obviously being pregnant, you controlled your diet, but I was getting all of those kind of symptoms, and I was just putting them all down to being pregnant. You know what I mean? At the time, I just thought, oh, you know, it's just a pregnancy thing, but when actual fact, it was actually down to my blood sugar levels that were the problem. Now, if I'm not saying that everyone's got an underlying diabetes problem. But if you're, you know, there was also another thing that came up through the pregnancy time was that my body, in regards to digesting sugars within my body, does work incredibly well to the point where they call me an enigma. I've got the diabetes doctor person, the highest bloke, would come and go, "You're my little enigma. I don't know how you do it. How are you walking?" At one point, he goes, "Didn't you feel ill?" And I was like, I felt like I needed to eat, but that was kind of it. You know, he was like, "You're such an enigma. I can't understand why your body's processing it like this. This is going through the tests." I know.
That's so you.
I know, I'm a little enigma all the way around. But when I looked at the symptoms, it just is it is a trigger. And when you think about it, when I have a lot of sugar, I do end up feeling tired, and I do have trouble concentrating. I'm bouncing off the walls. I can't concentrate on anything. You know what I mean? I'm like, literally, I've got so much energy, and I'm hot. I will get incredibly hot, which I'll keep putting down to the menopause, but it could be something else. You know what I mean? But it could be that I've got this underlying issue that I don't know I've got. But if I was on an investigation, there are certain things in there, headaches, high blood sugar level. You could get a headache through that, and you think, oh, I'm getting a really bad headache. And working in a spiritual way, before I probably would have put it down to maybe the energy I was using in regards to working spiritually, when it probably wasn't. It could have been something to do with the food I was eating.
Absolutely. I mean, this does also raise a question that maybe you should have a first aider on your team.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Because there are a few teams out there that don't have this, and I mean, you know, we're talking about high blood pressure at the moment, but there's also low blood pressure, low blood sugar.
Yeah.
And that can have quite a bad, effect on the body. I mean, high sugar level is quite dangerous. Low sugar level is, well, it's just as dangerous, but it's easily treated. I mean, I've had someone on one of our investigations. She come over very hot, and she felt faint. So we took her out the area, and she was basically crashing. The sugar levels were crashing. So I got the shop owner where he was to give her a can of Coke, and we built a sugar level up. And every time she comes out on an investigation now, I'll always add to the ticket, "Please remember to bring a can of Coke with you."
Yeah.
Or full fat, just for that reason.
Yeah.
Because it certainly is known within diabetic circles that if they have sort of like an episode, you know, to have like a bar of chocolate or a sort of like fizzy drink, and that can act really quickly. So it just goes to show how fast this sort of stuff can actually get into your system, even though that's doing it for the good. If you are just normal,
I mean, if your body does lose sugar, it can be really quite serious.
Yeah.
Where high sugar level is easy treatable. So no matter what way you think they're going, if you suspect the sugar level is the cause, always give them sugar. Because the ambulance crew will just come along, do their tests, and go, okay, the sugar level's high. We can counteract that, where if it drops too low, they can go into seizures, and worst case scenario is they die from it. So obviously it's always better to treat the worst case first.
So this brings a question then, doesn't it? Is if you're holding a public investigation, like a public event investigation, do you ask if there are underlying, if anybody has any health conditions that you need to be aware of, like diabetes, like heart condition, like, I don't know, those sort of things? Do you ask?
Personally, I do, because I've got that whole medical training, and anything that's said to me is in confidence, because I've still got that duty of care and stuff like that. So that's how I look at it. But I think as a general team that haven't got that, I don't think it's right for them to ask, because they haven't got the training, so they're not going to know, are they?
No.
And I suppose if someone actually knows they've got diabetes and stuff, the onus would be on them to take their own sort of like precautions, and they would know. Well, and you would hope so. And
I mean, diabetics normally have bracelets and necklaces saying I'm diabetic anyway. So if they do collapse for whatever reason, whoever it is, I mean, the best course of action is just to phone 999 and get the emergency services out, or 911, depends on where you are.
Yeah.
And get the emergency services out. They will also talk to you over the phone and tell you what to do until they get there. So I think for someone that hasn't had any first aid training, do that, because then they're under the guidance of the ambulance service. Yeah. Where someone like me or a first aider or someone, they could just ring up, say exactly what's going on. I mean, they'll be trained for that anyway. And then they go, I'm a first aider already. And then you get the ambulance dispatcher might just say, okay, well, I'll let you leave it with you, sort of thing. I'll inundate you with calls, so call back if there's any change. But help's on the way, sort of thing.
So in regards to any event, regardless if it's paranormal or not, is it law that there has to be a first aider present? Because there is at work, isn't there? Any job you have, there's got to be a first aider on site.
I think, I mean, there does have to be a first aider on site if you're an office-based job or anything like that. I would have thought, I mean, I don't know about the law to a point, but I should imagine, that you must have a first aid qualified person on an event, because even like big events like, I don't know, the V Festival that used to go on, they have to supply first aiders, and that's obviously why they got St John in to cover that.
Yeah.
Big events have to have first aiders. I do know, obviously, from my point of view, for every 1,000 people in a location, you have to have one first aider, and that's basically for an event. I think 2,500 people warrant an ambulance to be there.
Right.
It'd
be worth looking into, actually, wouldn't it? Whether or not it is, because some paranormal events have like 20 plus. Some I've known even some investigations have 50 people attend.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And maybe, I don't know, and this is just, a first aider would be a relevant part of that team. And how many teams do have that facility?
I say for me, a first aider is a must. We should have, in my team, every event we have, we've got one first aider. When I take on new staff, I always ask if they've got a first aid certificate, so I know who's qualified in first aid and who isn't, so I can mix and match to the locations. 9 times out of 10, it's normally me that goes along, and I'll be in the floating team, and I'll be the medic because my qualifications supersede a first aider, so I can make clinical decisions. So if someone needs an ambulance, I can make that decision. If they don't need an ambulance, I can make that decision. I can treat them. I can, what's the word? Not dismiss them, discharge them from the scenario. So, I can make all those decisions, and I'm qualified to do so. But a first aider is pretty much invaluable to have. I mean, if they're used to taking blood pressures, blood sugar levels and all that sort of stuff, it's all stuff that you can incorporate into the investigation as well.
Yeah.
Because if someone sits there and goes, oh yeah, I'm starting to feel a headache, is it paranormal? You know, if they report it as a first aid situation, they can go to the first aider and, well, maybe not the first aider, but if someone's more qualified, they can do the blood pressure, sugar level checks, and pretty much full medical, just sort of to see whether or not it is something they've eaten, something, you know, like diabetes or something.
That's on a high level of first aid, though. On a general,
that's a little bit higher.
Yeah, on a general
know,
level investigation, at least have a first aid box, I would say.
Absolutely, yeah. Definitely.
At least, you know, a basic recommended first aid box.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, I did, again, I had another lady on an investigation and she literally collapsed. And by the time I got to her friends were there and said, no, she's fine. She's all right. She just felt like she was drunk. So I took her to one side, sat down, had a cup of tea and a chat with her and stuff. And I said, look, I think you should go home. But she said, no, I'm fine. I'll carry on. A little bit later, she actually collapsed and she was down for quite a while. And I was called to her again. And I'd done like full medical blood sugar levels because they were contemplating calling an ambulance. I said, no, don't do that yet. Let's just see what's going on. So everything come back normal. There's nothing wrong with that woman whatsoever. She was faking it.
Oh.
And yeah, there was no explanation to say that it was a medical problem. So therefore, calling an ambulance would have been pointless.
But then you say that, but some conditions don't show up. Like fibromyalgia is hard to diagnose. Even doctors have trouble diagnosing it because all tests come back normal. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I mean, one of my friend's daughters has got this, and she would we would do spiritual events. She would be on another stall, and I'd be, and her daughter would literally just flake out. And it got to the point, you know, where she would, the mum would be stepping over, and I'd be like, "Is she all right?" Go, yeah, she's fine. She'll be all right in a minute. She'll come round. And it was just part of the condition.
That's what happened with this lady. I mean, okay, I didn't just sort of, you know, turn around and just say, okay, she's faking it, leave her to it. You know, I did some sort of aftercare as well.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah,
I'm sure you did. It sounded a bit blasé about it, like she was faking it, so I just left her there.
No, but you know, once we got her up and to the hub room, you know, we didn't waste the ambulance service's time because I pretty much was there. But, you know, we got her around and, you know, we called the event off early for her. And, you know, we sat with her, made sure she was okay before leaving, just in case she didn't have a second bout of it. But she was okay. And I said, look, if you go home, sleep it off, and then in the morning, you know, if you still feel yucky, then give 111 a call. Or go and see your GP.
Yeah.
And that's the best course of action for that.
Yeah.
Because obviously I've done the emergency checks.
Yeah.
There's nothing life-threatening. So could it have been spiritual? There's a slight possibility, but I'm a skeptic anyway, so I'll probably discount that. And just, yeah, I'll just send her home with her friends. Her friends stayed with her that night anyway. And I said, look, you know, just keep an eye on her. If she does it again, then go to the hospital, or see your GP. But as far as I know, she's fine.
Yeah, she's been on her event since as well, hasn't she?
Exactly, yeah. But luckily for me, I don't think she'll come on my events again.
I think the thing is, though, I think any team that is selling tickets to the public have to be aware of is keep level-headed, don't panic, think of your medical, you know, if you've got first aid training, follow your first aid training. But if in doubt, call an ambulance. You know what I mean? If in doubt, your care of duty is to your client and your customer, and that's your care of duty. I mean, Paul, we are very blessed in our team because we have Paul, who is obviously quite high in the ranks of the St. John's Ambulance. So for us, you know, we're very lucky people. Not everybody's got that, but if you,
no,
but
right.
I would recommend at least have a first aid box or a first aider because food can have an effect. Okay, getting back to topic, food can have an effect, and we've just talked about high blood sugar, and that's what led us down that one. But it also, this is a little one that I found quite interesting. Dopamine. it's the feel-good factor hormone, isn't it? So when you
Yeah.
eat something sugary, and you do something, it makes you feel good because it's releasing this hormone called dopamine.
Yeah,
Certainly,
that's right.
that's certainly true. I think for me, Jaffa cakes do it. I always feel pretty good after a whole packet of Jaffa cakes.
Now, dopamine is fine, but it gives you almost like a high. It gives you that
Yeah.
feel-good factor. This is where addiction comes in, actually. We're not talking about this. We're talking about this in general topic on this one. This is why people who seek out drugs, addictions, or alcohol or something, because it triggers their dopamine levels, and it's the reward bit. So you take something, you feel good, you want more of it.
Yeah, that is certainly. I can speak from experience there, and that is certainly sort of the problem of addiction. You know, it is you're constantly chasing that feel-good factor.
And lots of things can trigger this dopamine spike. Sugar, high fructose, corn syrups, all those sort of things, even down to sodiums and carb, all those things can trigger your dopamine levels to give you that feel-good factor, right? And within 20 minutes of eating our meal, I don't want to focus on that. We'll go with fast food meal. Within 20 minutes, those kind of ingredients start triggering your dopamine levels, which gives you that high. And it can make you want more. So like that could be why an hour after eating your fast food meal, you feel hungry again because your body's like coming down its dopamine levels and your body's going, hey, I like that feeling. I want more of it. You know what I mean? That's quite
That's
a low
it. I mean,
level, though, on a food factor, I would say.
You was talking about within 10 minutes, your sugar levels go to quite a high level. And then maybe once that starts waning off, then you 20 minutes, you've got those ingredients then kicking in and giving you another sugar high. So it is sort of, keeping your sugar levels high.
Yeah, and also I think, that need for food can bring in things like frustration. If it goes on long term, it can bring you down. It can make you feel like tired and depressed, and maybe your anxiety levels will start kicking off. And again, you're in a paranormal investigation scenario. You've got all of a sudden you're starting to feel anxious. Well, an hour ago you had that meal. It could be. It's a possibility. I'm not saying it's every possibility, but it could be actually your body's reaction to the food you've had, rather than a spiritual effect on you, like a spirit's making you feel anxious, or the atmosphere is making you feel anxious, or whatever. It could be your body's natural response. Now, remember we said at the beginning of the show, everybody's body reacts differently to certain foods. It's something to be aware of and something to think about. And when we talk in spiritual terms of know yourself, this is part of that, knowing how certain foods affect your body. You know what I mean? And I've talked about my personal experience
Well, I think
with that.
You are sort of right. Everyone is different, but saying that, it's almost like the levels are different as opposed to the reactions, because you can all have the same reactions. Well, you'll have the same reactions to like sugar levels, but it's at different levels. So, say for example, my sugar level goes to 10, and then I start getting the effects of sugar rush, but you might go up to level 12 and then start affecting it, or someone might have like level 5, so people have different levels. It's just the same effect, just at different periods.
So people will have different tolerance levels, and some people will be more hardier, like obviously Kerry can take quite a lot before she sort of goes over the edge.
Yeah, I can.
So you're right in what you're saying, but wrong, sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
You needed clarifying is what you meant by that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, high salt content does begin to take its toll on its body within 10 minutes as well. Now, it can lead to dehydration if you have continually high salt levels in your body, right? That's known. We need water.
Yeah.
Now, this I found out in diets, right? Many diets I've embraced over the years, currently embracing on one right now, I would say. A high level of salt in your body makes you feel thirsty, right? But it can make you feel like you're hungry. So
Yes.
they say sometimes that you should, if you're hungry, if you're on a diet and you feel like, oh God, I'm starving, have a drink. Because it could actually be that you're actually more dehydrated than actually hungry, because the feelings are very similar.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be careful, again, so if you're hungry, you might just need a drink because of the salt levels in your body. Isn't this what they call electrolytes, Paul? Isn't this like when you get like sunstroke?
Yeah.
They say you should have like sugar in Coke or something like that, like a high sugary drink, and salt, like a packet of salted crisps or something.
Yeah.
To bring your electrolytes back.
You can actually buy there's like a thing from the health shops that you can put into water that turns it into almost like an energy drink.
Oh, okay.
Like Lucozade or something like that. I can't remember what it's called, but it is the electrolytes. It puts extra ones into the water. Mm. Yeah.
And high salt can cause high blood pressure as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing it can do. Now, moving on quickly, because we're running out of time actually already. Tea and coffee, right? Oh, now I'm a right tea drinker. I drink tea endlessly. But it contains caffeine. Coffee contains caffeine.
It sure does.
Energy drinks, high energy drinks, have huge levels of caffeine in them.
Mm-hmm.
Sugar and caffeine in energy drinks mainly.
Yeah,
now,
it's mainly caffeine, yeah.
Caffeine, first thing in the morning, everyone reaches for their tea or coffee in the mornings because they need to wake up. They need the caffeine rush, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Can make your blood pressure go up for a short time.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Now, the caffeine is actually attributed to either an increase in adrenaline or a temporary block on the hormones that naturally widen your arteries. So too much caffeine can cause you to have headaches. So if you've been drinking copious amounts of tea or coffee throughout the night, coffee's worse than tea, I would say, and you get a headache, it could be caffeine that's the problem here.
Mm-hmm.
So restricting the arteries, you mean, sort of, and that can give you a headache?
Well, it increases your blood pressure. Which would then give you the headache.
Headaches, yeah.
Okay. So high blood pressure I looked into. Some people with high blood pressure can feel a pounding in their head or their chest, which can be translated in your brain as anxiety.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can understand that, yeah.
A feeling of lightheadedness or dizziness or headaches.
Yep.
Right, so again, all those things we could look at in regards to a paranormal investigation and think, oh, I'm having a physical effect, spirits are physically affecting me, when they might not. It could be you've had too much caffeine. Energy drinks this is almost like the go-to at about 2 o'clock in the morning when you're flagging on a paranormal investigation, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think people don't sort of realise sort of like quite what effect you are just looking for a quick fix, thinking, well, it's getting a bit late, I've got another couple of hours to do, let's have an energy drink. It's quite understandable.
Now,
I think going back to the dehydration as well, my little information elf come up with Diarrhelite, because apparently it puts all the salts and sugars back into your body.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people use that for when they have diarrhea.
Yes, hence the name.
But it's also used for dehydration, for to get the energy back into the body and stuff.
Yeah.
So carry on with the.
All right, sorry. We're looking at one particular can of energy drinks, but again, there are many other brands out there. We're not picking on this one in particular, but it is just something you need to be aware of. And actually, nowadays it is age-restricted energy drinks. I don't know about in your area, guys, but I know for a fact that my kids can't buy it, energy drinks, because of the effects of them. Now, in 80 milligrams of a 250 milliliter can of Red Bull, there is 80 milligrams, of caffeine in one can.
Which is extremely high.
You can overdose on caffeine, and it can cause basically you to be addicted to it.
Yeah.
Very addictive.
as I've sort of spoken to you two in the past in private, I used to work in a drug and alcohol rehab, and in the rehab centres, obviously drugs and alcohol aren't allowed in the rehab centres, and so are energy drinks. There's a ban on them precisely because of that.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen it, but there was a video on social media talking about energy drinks, and it was a guy in hospital, and literally his chest was jumping right out high.
Yeah, that was horrible to watch. Actually, I saw
that. That was actually fake.
Thank God for that.
It wasn't anything. That wasn't anything to do with energy drinks. That what that guy had in the video was fractured ribs.
Oh, okay.
So the rib cage wasn't doing its job, basically. But people put that down to and linked it to the energy drinks.
Yeah.
Which is total rubbish.
Oh, okay. Thank you for clearing that one up. Because
Just
I did watch that. I
out.
was a little horrified. Put me off energy drinks.
Yeah.
Now, in regards to sugar, now this was clever marketing, I have to say. An average can, or a normal can of Red Bull, and as I say, there are plenty of other brands out there, not picking on Red Bull in particular, is 250 millilitres.
Yeah.
Now, in regards to sugar, it said there were 11 grams per 100 millilitres. Yet, in regards to caffeine, it actually went on the actual can size. So be careful if you are interested in your health and stuff and are looking at the little chart that every piece of food now has on it, be aware of your sizes, because 100 millilitres is what? 100 plus a bit of sugar, so it's 11 grams per 100 millilitres. So in a 250 millilitre can, you've got 22 and a bit more, about 25 grams of sugar in there as well. So you've got 80 milligrams of...
about 27 grams roughly.
Yeah, and then you've got 27 grams. But the way they worded it made you think, it's only got 11 grams of sugar. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It hasn't. It was, the marketing on that one was quite clever. But... an effect of high energy drinks can give you palpitations, which is called tachycardia.
That's right, tachycardia. Yeah.
Tremors, shaking, agitation, which agitation could be read as anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Restlessness, upset stomach, chest pains, dizziness, tingling or numbing of the skin, insomnia. I'm not even going to try and say the word of that one. Just go with tingling or numbing of the skin.
Insomnia.
No, paresthesia.
Oh, okay, the tingling and numbing of the skin.
Yeah, that's that one.
Yeah, tingling and numbness will do.
Insomnia, respiratory distress, but I would imagine that these are the extreme ones, so if you're an extended use of these...
almost like a panic attack, basically.
Yeah, headaches. So again, if you're drinking 2 or 3 cans of Red Bull throughout an evening to keep yourself going for no sleep... then that is sort of, again, you've got to be aware of that effect on your body.
Yeah, indeed, definitely.
With these kind of products. Now, one thing, adrenaline. We all get excited going on an investigation, right?
Yeah, adrenaline rush.
There is an adrenaline rush, and it begins in your brain. It usually is the fight or flight scenario, right? So you get that adrenaline. And it normally kicks in if you're in a threatening situation. But it also happens when you're in an exciting situation. And when you're going on an investigation, you're always excited. The high leading up to the investigation in the car is off the scale. You'll see people singing in the car and, really excited. We just arrived at our investigation. And, oh, my God, look at the location. And, oh, my God, it's so amazing. And all that sort of stuff.
So what part of the brain is affected by that then?
No. The amygdala.
Well done, Paul.
You're the first aider part. You should know this. Yeah, I saw that too.
Well, I just see that word in the research, and I thought, I was so going to get Kerry to say that.
I had my eye on it as well.
Now, oh dear. Now this bit of the brain plays a part in emotional processing, right? Now this is why this is important, because it plays a part. And if your adrenaline is kicking off, it takes important part in your emotional processing. If you've had a dead still night, then something is happens that's perceived as paranormal, your adrenaline will kick in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That will affect your emotional processing of that situation.
Mm-hmm.
You are dealing with it in a fight or flight scenario.
Very much so.
You have to be aware of this, because how you're perceiving it will affect what you think it is.
Yeah, I can actually see that. It's a funny thing, I've got the image of remember Corporal Jones from Dad's Army when he used to get really excited and say, "Don't panic,
Don't panic, don't
don't
panic."
panic."
Don't
You know, he went to the actual extreme. So that is just something that come into my mind. But yeah, I can see that.
Now, we've watched many programs where we've seen something's happened, a big scream, everyone's running, running out of the room and going, "Oh, yeah, that's scary," and that. But that's because this has kicked in, your emotional processing has kicked in, and your fight or flight has kicked in, and you've got to get out of the situation.
And it does seem to be contagious, doesn't it? Once one person
Yes.
goes, the people around them can actually sort of go.
Yes, very much so. Now, this is something you have to be aware of. Most of us paranormal investigators we'll run towards it rather than away from it. A lot of that's bravado, because if something really kicked off, I defy anybody on this planet to not have an adrenaline kick or an adrenaline rush at that point, because that's what you've been waiting for all night, effectively. That's why you're there. But when it's happening, your normal emotional processing is under pressure. You will not be processing it in the way you would normally if you was completely calm under normal circumstances, right?
Yeah, that's more or less your instinct kicking in, isn't it? And,
Yeah.
And you would have to be extremely disciplined to override that.
Mm-hmm. Now, once the adrenaline hits the bloodstream, it binds receptors to liver cells to break down larger sugar molecules called glycogen, right?
Right.
So it gives your muscles, it gives your muscle, basically what it's saying is it gives your muscles a boost of energy so you can run away faster.
That's exactly what it is, yeah.
So all of a sudden, your muscles have now got a massive boost of energy. So you're tensing up, you're ready for action, right?
Yep.
Your heart beats faster. It's pumping that blood around your body, right?
Yep, correct.
All the blood gets directed towards your major muscle groups.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you maybe start to perspire because it contracts the muscle cells below the surface of the skin to stimulate perspiration. So you might start to get hot and sweat. All this is building up. It's like a little massive furnace has had a massive boost inside your body at the point of this adrenaline rush. Now, you'll tend to go into an investigation in that state to start with. It fades out when you settle down, you get your kit set up, you're laughing and joking with your mates, you're settling down, all those things settle down. But it doesn't take a lot to trigger this.
Yeah.
So when you hit a point of the evening where something happens, possibly, it will click in quick.
Well, almost immediately, won't it? You sort of anyone that gets a start, or suddenly, you do sort of. It does seem to kick in immediately, doesn't it? It seems to be that strong an instinct in us.
It's very, very. It is very strong. Now, nerves can do this as well. If you get yourself into a situation like I've seen this with a public investigation where one lady was very nervous. She's very scared of the situation. Why she put herself in it, I don't actually understand. I don't actually understand that bit. But this is part of the reason why we do what we do. We want to experience something. We want that adrenaline kick. We're out there wanting that something to happen. So the anticipation of that is there. And public people who may not have the knowledge of, it's generally a quiet night and, we're doing our best with what we've got. Happens, but when it does happen, if you've gone into that and you're already nervous, you're already in a heightened state of nervousness or agitation, it doesn't take a lot to kick your adrenaline into that situation. I had this lady in particular, we was on the spirit box, and she perceived what was coming through was relevant to her in regards to a spirit, and she went off. She was in a right old state because her adrenaline rush kicked in, and her body was reacting to that in an already heightened nervous state. it didn't take much to then kick her adrenaline system over the edge. We got her out of the situation. I explained some of the more sceptical perspective, should we say, on the situation. Explained pareidolia to her. You know, all of those things. It calmed her right down. But at that point, her system was already overloaded to the point of her fight or flight did not take a lot to kick in because she heard a couple of words she thought she heard through a spirit box session.
Yeah.
So her evening was sort of, if she was sort of like apprehensive about going in the first place, she would have been in that constant state of apprehension. So that would have heightened for anything that did occur for her to perceive it as something
and don't forget,
directed to her. Exactly.
And don't forget, this adrenaline is changing how you emotionally process things.
Yeah.
It's processing it in an instinctual fight or flight way, rather than a cold, collected, balanced mindset way.
The human body is very instinctual.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the fight or flight is basically sort of must go back to the time when we had to avoid wild animals, and if a bear jumps out on you, I mean, you have got to be scared. You know, that is going to be the main sort of impetus to actually get you running faster.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's what it's all about.
You can generally tell when someone's in that heightened state. They tend to be more breathing more rapidly. They're very flinchy, so any little thing, their senses are heightened. So they're sort of like, like jittery, I think is the expression.
On edge.
Yeah, you know, their pupils could be dilated, although in the dark that's hard to see. If you took their heart rate would be raised. You know, they might be sweating more profusely. I mean, temperature you have to take into consideration with that one. If it's a freezing cold night and someone's sweating, then that's an indicator, right?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
You know, there are physical signals, that's the word, that you can physically see if someone in your group is maybe in a high adrenaline state through this. It can be looked at as anxiety. Again, anxiety. A lot of these things you can read as anxiety, but these could be physical issues or the effect of food that's had on them.
It's also an effect of pain as well. If someone's been injured, then you get that sort of stuff as well. Because obviously the body's trying to compensate for the pain, so it releases extra adrenaline and yeah.
And also, it can be quite addictive. This adrenaline rush, it can be incredibly addictive. Think of the thrill seekers, like we call them adrenaline junkies.
Well, yeah.
I call them idiots.
Yeah. Same here. But, you know.
Bungee jumping, I mean, what's that about?
Travel around to all these... It's all these people that travel around to various amusement parks to go on all these roller coasters. I can't see the attraction.
I actually know a couple of people that do that. Yeah. They're in a roller coaster club and they go around the world. Yeah,
it's because they're addicted to the adrenaline rush. They're addicted to that feeling, and because for them it gives them pleasure. It's releasing high dosage levels of dopamine, which creates the addictive part. It makes them feel good. They want more of that, so they'll go and find out the next adrenaline rush scenario.
See, I couldn't do that because I don't think I'd have enough trousers.
No. Oh dear. Now the other thing maybe to consider, and this isn't so much as food, but this is weather. I am a well-known fair weather paranormal investigator. It's well known. I won't go out in the cold weather. It affects me physically too much. I get painful, and it won't just be on the day or the night of the investigation. It'll be for a couple of days afterwards. My joints, I'm getting older, everybody. I don't suit well to cold weather. I really feel the cold in the best of times. Anyway, it could be a really hot day and I could feel quite cold at times if I'm indoors and not in the direct sun. I feel the cold. So when I'm out in the cold weather, it affects me physically. I get cold joints, I get stiff, I get sluggish, there's a lot of things actually that I don't like about that. So I won't investigate now in the depths of winter when it's a cold night. Nah, forget it. I'm not doing it because I feel too rough afterwards, you know. And on the investigation, I just get goddamn miserable because I'm cold. Well, yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And especially if you haven't had your McDonald's as well, you get hangry. That is a right.
It's a right bad combo, everybody.
And this is why, again, you should have a first aider on the team, because a first aider will be able to spot any mild hypothermia kicking in. So they should be able to do something about it at that point so that it doesn't progress.
Yeah, I mean, in the UK, a lot of the buildings we investigate are drafty, cold manor houses or castles or cave systems. And, the cold weather or the cold needs to be a consideration. Yes, we can dress up. Yes, we can wear thermals. Yes, we take regular breaks with hot drinks. We would do what we can to minimise that factor.
Yes, definitely.
But it's still a factor that needs to be considered, particularly when you are investigating in the cold. Because, as I say, personally, just normal joint pain is bad enough for me to put me off doing it. But there are some hardened people out there that will go out no matter what the weather, And so mild hypothermia is not external temperature. This is another thing I found out, actually. It was about core temperature, inside core temperature, not external. So if you touch someone's skin, it's hard actually to judge their temperature because it's your core temperature. Fevers, you feel hot, but the only way of knowing for a fact if it's a fever would be in core temperature, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because when your core temperature does start to sort of drop, it will automatically try and warm up your external regions first, that's why you cannot necessarily feel by touch if somebody's sort of like.
No, that's it. And the first hypothermia. And the first signs of going into some sort of hypothermia is basically shivering. You get the shivering, your teeth chatter together, and then obviously the next step will be shallow breathing. Then you might be a bit clumsy, dropping things, not being able to grip things with your hands and stuff. And if it does go any further than that, you get slurred speech, confusion, your pulse weakens, and funnily enough, despite how cold you are, you actually want to start taking off all your clothes.
Yeah, apparently so.
That's not
apparently so.
Yeah, because they start. Although their body's getting cold, they start feeling hot, so they want to strip off because they're thinking they're overheating, and they're not. They're actually going the other way, which then hypothermia gets in even quicker, and then becomes quite serious. But
that does explain a lot, because I remember when we went to Landguard Fort, Kerry, we were sort of like pretty clumsy around there. Perhaps that was and hypothermia, because we kept tripping up everything.
I just think that's our age, Rich. I just think that's our age. We can't put it down to
hypothermia. It was the middle of the summer, mind, but
it was a very hot day. I definitely don't think we can put that down to hypothermia. But these things you need to consider when you're on an investigation, and not just for yourselves but your teammates. We've said before, it's paranormal investigating isn't just about going out and trying to capture paranormal activity. It's about many things, and within that you have to be very aware of your own body as much as anything else. Paranormal hangover, all of these things we've talked about in regards to food tonight, the day after, the effects of that, not to mention the fact that you've had a lack of sleep from the night before. All these physical effects your body's gone through on that investigation take its toll and can make you feel like you've got a good old hangover. Everybody, is it spiritual to some extent? Who knows? But before you go to that conclusion, I would certainly look at maybe the food you've eaten beforehand or the conditions you were actually investigating in on the night. On that note, we've actually come to the end of the show. Paul, how's your experiment going?
Yes.
Because this is like we're a couple of weeks in now. How's your experiment
going?
It's
going really well, actually. I've written my second blog.
Yeah.
So I've got blog 1 and 2 done. It's going really well. I mean, last Friday we just had a talking session with William Becker about how he does his spiritual mediumship and stuff. And last Friday, we done another meditation. You can read all that in my blogs when I release them.
Exactly. Looking forward to that one, most definitely. Next week, we are actually going down an app route. We're looking at paranormal apps. We've got the lovely Brian Holloway joining us into the studio. He's one of the app developers out there. And Paul, myself and Richard have actually been having a go at a few apps in various circumstances to see if we've got any kind of response. So join us next week, next Tuesday, on Paranormal UK Radio Network exclusive. Oh, I've done it the wrong way round, haven't I?
You've done it the wrong way round here.
The Paranormal Concept Show exclusive to the Paranormal UK Radio Network.
Got it.
Well done, Kerry.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
And our producer. Come on.
Yes, don't forget our lovely producer, Andy Mercer. So, join us next week on the Paranormal Concept Show. We hope you enjoyed. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.